So this week we've been talking not only about some Big 12 football, but also about a race for an incredibly talented running back, one Eric Gray, Tennessee Vols transfer. Now, I made a video the other day talking about how he was being recruited right now primarily by both Oklahoma and Texas, but Texas was pursuing him a little bit harder. OU wasn't pursuing him to the same degree as it was first being reported, and I wasn't shocked by that, but I disagreed with the decision. OU, I believe, was trying to hold out as long as they could to convince Kamar Wheaton that they weren't interested in bringing anybody else in, that he was their guy. But alas, last night we get the news that Eric Gray is transferring to Oklahoma, and we have got to talk about why this is so important. But before we do, I want to hear from y'all, so I'll be pinning this down in the comments. I made a video yesterday talking about how I thought OU was in prime position to make it to the Big 12 championship, and the question was really about who was going to be that number 2 team, right? Whether it was going to be Iowa State or Texas. Now with the addition of Eric Gray, do y'all think there's anybody in the Big 12 that has a reasonable chance of beating Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game? I have to be honest, I really don't see how they're going to be able to stop Oklahoma with everybody they return, but we're going to get into that in a little bit. Y'all, if you're here, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification, that way anytime I'm uploading, you know I do constant college football content, film reviews, play call reviews, and talk videos like this, so I'd love to have y'all along for the journey. With all that being said, let's get into this. And a team that was already primed to make a Big 12 championship run again and continue their reign on the Big 12 is just even in a better position to do so after the transfer in of Eric Gray. Now, when I made that video the other day saying Texas needs to get Eric Gray, I made that video for 2 primary purposes. The first, with Steve Sarkisian being a new head coach, with you not having continuity at the quarterback position, sure, you might have Bijan Robinson, one of the most talented running backs in the nation. Everybody understands that. But when you have a guy like Eric Gray coming in to add depth at a position that Sark already loves to utilize, I don't see how that's a bad thing. I would imagine it would only help Texas get better quicker, and it would make the ease into a new quarterback much, much more efficient, right? Because he wouldn't have to go out there with only a few stable of running backs. He could have an entire backfield ready to go, fresh legs for days. And I know there was a lot of concern as whether or not there'd be a crowded backfield, but I think Steve Sarkisian knows how to do this. Y'all have to remember, he's been on staffs where there have been tons of running backs and they've figured out how to get them all involved. But the primary reason why I said it was so important for Texas to land Eric Gray was that so OU didn't land Eric Gray. Now look, I'm not a fan of any team within the Big 12. I just love college football and by extension love the Big 12 as I love every conference. But the fact of the matter is, OU was already a head and shoulder above everybody else given the depth of talent that they return. Iowa State returns a ton of talent, and like I said in yesterday's video, in theory they seem to be the odds-on favorite, though I do believe that there is a chance Texas could push them for that number 2 spot, and I think that that's going to be a more intriguing conversation the more we get into the season. But the point remains, even though Iowa State returned a lot of people, Oklahoma returned a lot of guys who were really young. And now they're not all that young anymore. Now they've been in the system a year. Iowa State returned a lot of guys who've been there before, who've kind of already had experience, and OU got that last season, which means now this isn't the young team anymore. This is a team ready to go. And this is a team that's going to be looking for some revenge because of the way their season started this past season. Now, I've always said OU had maybe one of the most disappointing season starts to any Power 5 school in the nation, but when you find yourself, and when you are a program to the, pedigree of Oklahoma, when you find yourself in a position where okay, I'm not going to make college football playoff, the only thing left to do in that circumstance is to just get better every single week. And I cannot say how much respect I had for Lincoln Riley and company when they made that their mindset, when they literally went out there and you could see that their goal, and I know every college's goal is to get better every single week, but I think it's a little bit different when you know that you're not going to make it to the college football playoff and you can kind of go into games with a little different mindset, whereas you might be in a situation where you know that you need to develop a player in a certain way, but it takes away from the offensive productivity, so to speak. You can't do that if you're in the vying for a playoff spot because it could cost you a game. Oklahoma ended up being able to develop a lot of guys, to be able to do a lot of great learning in in-game settings, and oh, by the way, do it without dropping many games, which was incredibly impressive, and it culminates into the end of the season that they had. Now, I think the only questions I have is, one, I think this is both for Oklahoma fans and Alabama fans. Alabama fans, I'd feel much better about your standing with Kamar Wheaton now. I think that this might be an indication that OU feels that while they might still be in the running for Kamar Wheaton, guys, OU, when they're recruiting an offensive player, they're always in the running. Even against Alabama, right? I think that Alabama has the lion's share probability to land Kamar Wheaton, but I'd be being facetious and dishonest if I said Oklahoma isn't a incredibly tough sell to recruit against, specifically at running back, because they are an institution that heralds a proud staple of successful running backs into the NFL. And so look, that's one of the institutions when if Alabama's to lose a running back recruit there, I think everybody's maybe a little surprised, but those who really know the ins and outs of the game aren't all that surprised. That being said, Crimson Tide Nation, I think that this is a pretty good indication that Kamar Wheaton is pretty much all but locked in his recruitment to Alabama. At least that's how I'm interpreting this, but hey, I've been wrong before and I could be wrong on this. Essentially, y'all, to close this video, what was already a year where Oklahoma was just above everybody else going into the next year into the Big 12, they add in an Eric Gray, and they are killing it in the transfer market right now. OU is head and shoulders above everybody else in the Big 12 as it sits right now. Iowa State and Texas look to nip at their heels, although, like I said in yesterday's video, in theory, I think Texas has a path to get Iowa State. I think that it wouldn't surprise me if Texas ends up as the number 2 team in the Big 12, although I think that Iowa State is much more likely, given the fact that they return continuity at the quarterback, continuity at the head coach, continuity at the running back, and all of those guys are good. I have my reservations about Brock Purdy, but it's not as whether or not he can play quarterback. I have my reservations about whether or not he is a first rounder, right? Those are two entirely different conversations, and we will have that at some point. But y'all, that is it. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification, drop a like, and like I said, drop a comment down below letting me know, do you think there's any chance anybody's catching OU in the Big 12? That's it. See ya.